Considering Konami are shooting themselves in the head more than once, looking back on their classics is all we can really do, particularly the Castlevania games. Symphony of the Night is my favourite in the series with its Metroid-style gameplay, but the one character, one path, one epic journeys on the NES definitely have its place in video gaming history. But Super Castlevania IV on the Super Nintendo is considered the best of the linear-styled action horror platformers. Even though it's called Super Castlevania IV, it's actually a remake of the first game on the NES, and the development team looked at a copy and took it to 11 by enhancing the graphics, the story, and controls. In fact, I would say there's enough change in this game to count it as something completely different. If you're uninterested in this piece of text, here's the abridged version of the story. The year is 1691 in Transylvania. Another century has gone by. Dracula is brought back to life. Humanity weakens, and vampire hunter Simon Belmont goes to his castle to stop him. There's something about the plot in Castlevania that perplexes me. Why is it when Dracula comes back to life, but one man goes to stop everything the vampire throws at him, and nobody comes to help? Like, Simon is the only one who knows about Dracula's resurrection. But it's an action platformer where you take down lots of enemies inspired by Universal monster movies back in the 30s. Sounds awesome. What's good is that, despite the chilling intro, you can just start the game instantly for the first time and already know what to expect. Go to Dracula's castle and defeat him. Belmont not only fights the evil vampire, but his companions like dragons, skulls, mummies, and the Grim Reaper. Even the Grim Reaper is second to Dracula. Belmont should have brought Blade with him because Dracula is a powerful son of a bitch. Seriously, he puts up a fight in the last level. We'll get to that. But it's Simon Belmont and Simon Belmont only, just like the first game. Now, I never grew up with the Castlevania series, but this soundtrack gives me the goosebumps, it's that good. It sets things on the right foot with this melody. Then it calms down. Then remixes the NES classics on the last couple of stages. And they all look amazing. The first few levels are basically the entrance before eventually reaching the doors of the castle, and because of this, there are so many cool and diverse looking backgrounds, dark weather, parallel scrolling, gorgeous scenery. Look at that rocky skull and bats flying through it. Treasure boxes open when landing on it. The fence comes out of the ground and roots grow around it. The castle has an acid trip. Hundreds of operating gears. It instantly takes you back to the 1930s, or 1690s. And you hardly see the same thing more than once. It even takes advantage of Mode 7 with this level and boss. Sure, the background is non-existent, but so what? It looks marvelous. I am a little disappointed by the censorship, however. The Japanese version includes blood and crosses, all non-existent in the international version, which doesn't make any sense. It's Castlevania. I admit, parents back in the early 90s would freak out if they found out that this acid was meant to be the blood. But crosses? Do you really think those little crosses in the distant background will make the game so inappropriate? Still, to have that level of attention to detail in an early Super Nintendo game clearly indicates effort, made even more impressive by the fact that to this day, it's still pleasing to the eye. When you complete a stage, it has a mini-map of what the next one will look like. Who would have thought Dracula could have such a massive property, let alone when he just arisen from the dead? There are a total of 11 stages and it only takes about 2 hours max to beat, which doesn't seem that short for an early 16-bit action horror platformer that barely looks the same each stage. In short, it doesn't overstay its welcome. The difficulty is pretty similar to the NES games, but with much better gameplay, so the challenge is fairer. However, there are going to be a couple of moments that'll test your general temper. The first few stages are as straightforward as they get, which gives you a chance to get used to the controls, so at least it has the correct difficulty curve. The real issue is when you get hit, you gravitate, and as a result, an enemy can pop up on the edge of a platform and instantly kill you. Talk about poor enemy placement. I know the level designs look gorgeous, but design from a gameplay perspective is not brilliant. This is definitely the hardest part in the game that isn't a boss. These platforms are controlled by a 4-year-old or Dracula because they literally appear at random and one unlucky slip up equals instant death. When you lose all your lives, you go right back to the beginning of the stage, but hey, it's better than starting the game all over again. Ahem. There are also a few moments where Belmont goes through the platforms. What, there wasn't a wet floor sign there? And the cameras on the tower parts of the stage must be jammed because it can look up, but not down, which also equals instant death. Was it too much to make the camera go down with Belmont as opposed to going back to the start? Candles are scattered everywhere and vary between hearts, health, weapons, and multiple special attacks. They all have purpose, but why are hearts ammunition for a special weapon? It's almost the complete opposite of health. Seriously, in a video game, what is the first thing that comes to mind when you see a heart? Health comes in the form of meat and can sometimes be hidden in the walls. When in doubt, whip 'em. The boss battles appear at the end of a stage and have different movements, so for most, don't expect to beat it the first time. When defeated, an orb pops up. I'd look at it as an explanation for why Belmont has full health the next level. I know I said the level design isn't perfect, but the controls more than make up for it because they're better than any other Castlevania game, even with a GameCube controller. Yeah, I downloaded this off the Virtual Console. There are only 4 things you need to know: jump, whip, special, and movement. So basic you could play this game with an NES controller. In the predecessors, you can only whip in front and have no momentum when you jump. To be honest, looking back, the controls are pretty clunky. But in Super Castlevania IV, Belmont moves fairly slow, but instead of whipping in front, you can whip in all 8 directions, which makes killing enemies a lot easier. You can swing onto other platforms and hold the attack and wave the whip around as a shield. You can control yourself in mid-air and move while crouching. The stairs aren't as much of a pain in the ass because you can simply walk on it even in mid-air. There's so much Belmont can do, especially in comparison to the NES predecessors. Watch your moonwalk. Playing it feels like a completely different Castlevania from its NES counterpart. The controls are very satisfying, almost perfect for that matter. As usual, I avoid spoiling the plot in video games, but every single Castlevania is about going to Dracula's castle and killing him. I think anyone with half a brain would know the final outcome, but here's a link to skip if you don't want to know what the final outcome looks like. First, you have to take on 3 different bosses, which sound like an endurance event, but you get instant checkpoints to each boss, even if you get the game over screen, which is extremely handy, especially against death, no pun intended. Then the torches set off, as Belmont is only moments away from facing Dracula. He can smell Belmont's blood, and is ready to— oh, wait a minute, Belmont needs to prepare himself first. I take it that these are Dracula's items and a floor panel just snapped? That being said, that's a good idea, and I'm relieved that— oh, he just fell to his death. The first half of battling Dracula is challenging. You have to dodge spread projectiles, ground flames, moving flames. It's gonna take a few attempts to get the rhythm. But once Dracula's health is low, oh man, you know shit just got serious when the first level music replays. All you do here is dodge lightning. This part isn't too hard. Then Dracula is exposed to the sun and is defeated once again. When will he ever learn? Perfect timing when you think about it. Why couldn't Belmont just go after Dracula during the day? The sun continues to rise as Belmont watches the castle crumble, symbolizing all your hard work. Now that is a beautiful shot. The credits roll with highlights, memories, and brings you back to the start. Yes, beating the game only restarts it with harder enemies to kill, which means the only replayability you get is a bigger challenge. Disappointing really, but I can still say I beat Super Castlevania IV on the Nintendo Wii. This is a perfect example of a game that has aged incredibly well. It's no casual walk in the park, but what Castlevania game is there that isn't hard by design? Super Castlevania IV gets an 8.5 out of 10. It has a great blend of gameplay, music, story, and dark atmosphere that probably scared a few kids back in 1991. I still think Symphony of the Night is better because you have more to do and it looks, dare I say, a little extra polished. But Super Castlevania IV is second. The controls make this a joy to play. I'm surprised you can't get this on the PlayStation Store or Xbox Live. Granted, it's a Super Nintendo game, but so is Super Star Wars and you can get that on the PS4. At least I was able to get it on the Virtual Console. Physical copies are hard to come by in Australia, but regardless of what copy you have, you'll certainly have a blast playing it.